This is the Denise McAllister podcast. Hi, I'm Denise McAllister, and I'm joined today with my dear friend Katelyn Crist. Call her Kate, so Katelyn Crist, and she is an adoptee. And one of the topics that the main topic we're going to talk about today is this whole notion of having babies. And I'm responding mainly to the Democratic nominee for the 2020 race, Pete Buttigieg. I think that's how you pronounce it. And he's gay, openly gay, and he's announced that he and his husband are going to be having a child soon. I have written about this in the past, so this isn't a new topic or even reactionary to this man, but I've talked about it in response to single women, single men. I don't know if that's more of a thing, but celebrities especially who go to sperm banks, order their babies, and have children through surrogacy, through sperm banks, whatever, where in essence you have a baby and they never know either their mother or their father. It's a designed family by either homosexual couples or singles, and there seems to be a complete ignoring the fact that children need their biological parents and that we can have these artificial and constructive families ignoring the children's needs. So I wanted to make a commentary on this because it's a very complex issue. It involves our understanding of identity, our understanding of family relationships, discovering who we are as people, the real connection that we have through biology, through nature, and that we can't always artificially construct things to replace that which is designed for our optimal benefit. And that's what I wanted to discuss today with Kate. So first of all, let me just make some parameters here. I am not talking about adoption. So when we talk about children not knowing their biological parents, there are a whole group of people out there who do not know their biological parents, or they do, but they don't have a relationship with them. They weren't raised by them because of adoption. That is a situation where many parents have an unplanned pregnancy, difficult situation. They put their baby up for adoption, and in our adoptive system, the primary adoptive parents are a man and a woman, the traditional adoption circumstance. That is a situation where it is a difficult situation. It's not something that was planned. It's not something that was intentional. And it's often where these parents are trying to do the best for their children. They find themselves in a situation where they just can't simply raise the children. And thankfully, they're raising them and not killing them in abortion. So we give a lot of kudos to these parents and their bravery and the struggle it must be to give up their children that way. And then, of course, the adoptive parents who take these children on and love them. But still, we can learn from adoptees because they can speak to not knowing their biological parents and what that need is, even as they're grateful to their adoptive parents and the love that they have for them. But they can speak to that as well as we can hear from kids who have been raised in families where they were deprived of their biological parents on purpose. But I'm not talking to one of those right now. I'm talking to one of the adoptees. So I'd like to hear Kate's view on this as far as the going to sperm banks, buying eggs or surrogacy, and basically ordering a child into, a single family or a same-sex family where the mother or the father in that situation is intentionally denied. The pushback of the people who are arguing for that say, love is all that matters. I've chosen this baby. We're bringing them into this loving situation where there's money, where there's two people here or even one person here with enough resources. And that's fine. That's enough. They don't need to know their biological parent. And we shouldn't speak against that. So what are your thoughts on that, Kate?
I have a lot of thoughts about that. Just to give your listeners a little bit of background about my situation, I think it's important to understand my perspective. I am not speaking for all adoptees, but I am in community with a lot of other adoptees. So we can share our experiences, share reunion stories, share growing up adopted stories. So I do have a pretty wide breadth of discussion about various situations and how people are affected by adoption, both the good and the bad. My biological mother was 19 when she had me. Of course, it was an unplanned pregnancy. She was in her first year of college. I was adopted out of Ohio, And Ohio adoption laws do play a role in this and make me an interesting person to talk to because they are closed adoptions. They are closed adoptions in Ohio, which means that your records are sealed. You are, even when you reach the age of majority, you are still not allowed to go get your original birth certificate. You are not allowed to see what's in your file without your adoptive parents' consent until you are the age of 21. So when I wanted to search and find out more about my biological family when I was 19 years old, I still had to get my adoptive parents' consent to access the files that the adoption agency had. That wasn't even my original birth certificate. That was just what the files were at the adoption agency. And when you are part of a closed adoption, I have the most wonderful parents. They are just excellent people, and they also were amazing parents. I have a great extended family too. I was never made to feel like an outsider. I was very loved by both my parents and the extended family. So there never was an issue with where some adoptees where they're made to feel like outsiders. That's kind of a different experience. I was loved. I was cared for. I still am. That wasn't the issue, which almost even lends itself more to the argument of, despite all of that, as I was growing up, there still are issues when your biology starts to come into play. And that is never more present than science class in your school, when you do your genetics unit, and when you go to the doctor. And part of the questions that come up is always, well, do you know your medical history?
Well,
No.
I mean, but you may have, a lot of these people might have papers and all that, but there's still the issue of the relationship, even if you have all the data.
Yes, it's true.
Data is not the same thing as a personal relationship.
True, but that's usually where the questions start.
Okay.
And oftentimes what's interesting with adoptees is growing up children, you have less of an issue as when you get older. And it usually starts with science class or in the doctor's office where they're like, well, what do you know about your medical history? And you're sitting there going, I don't know much of anything. Or it's just what is put down on paper. And then you get to science class and they're, well, what color eyes do your parents have? Do they have thumbs that bend this way or that way? All the little genetic things that they discuss. And you're going, oh my gosh, I don't know that either. And if I know that about my biological mom because it's in paper, I don't know that about the rest of the family. And then you get into further like your history class and they start asking about, well, what nationalities are your family from? And you're going, oh gosh, I don't know that either. And yes, you can put down your adoptive parents, but that doesn't feel right either. So you start to, or at least for me, I started to think, well, gosh, I don't know any of this. And then I also, and my adoptive parents, they gave me everything that they had, which wasn't much, again, because of 1980 Ohio adoption laws. But when I got into college and I started to emotionally go through some things and I started to feel on a different level these layers of identity when you're trying to figure out, well, what am I good at? What do I want to do? Where do I want to go with my life? Your biology really plays a huge part in that. Your talents, the way you think, the way you react to things is often encoded in your DNA. And we understand that more now than we ever have before. The role that genetics, the role that even your experience in the womb plays and how you grow the rest of your life. That's why like prenatal care is so important. Your attachment that you form with your mother in the womb. I have 4 kids of my own. I've grown 4 kids, and the attachment that I formed with my children from minute 1 of conception through their birth is an extraordinary experience. And getting to attach to my children before birth, and then even that first month of life that I missed out on, even being into a permanent adoption situation, it reshapes how you look at everything. And I would say even in talking to my adoption community, a lot of times having children themselves is a huge kind of a breaking point for a lot of adoptees, because you realize fully the attachment experience that happens that is severed, and what the potential of what that can do to somebody. And that often doesn't really get discussed very often. And again, this is kind of why this is so important. So for a single person who goes and orders a child, for example, goes to a sperm bank, they get that maternal half of things, but then there's the father experience that the child misses out on as well. So,
well, yeah, and whether it's through sperm donating or, getting someone to donate their egg and having the baby for you, it's even more, I think, insidious, and this is probably why I've been talking a lot about this, is the purposeful planning. Because a lot of these, like you talked about it, your mom was in a difficult situation, your bio mom, and had to give you up. You've reconnected later. So many of these people, and it's usually wealthier people in their privilege, if you want to use the leftist terms, who I want to have a baby, even though you don't have a relationship that actually creates a baby. So you're sidestepping the normal path of human identity, human development, human relationship, and the family. You just are, because you have to go outside of the norm in order to create that to happen. So you get a woman to carry the baby, and then after the weaning process, you take the baby away from the mother, or you use a sperm donor. And there was a whole movie, The Kids Are All Right, that was done about this, that explored this concept, and it really put nurture way over nature in that film. But I keep going back to the initial purposes of the people who are doing this. Especially talking to someone who's adopted, and you understand the pain, and need to know where you are from. To purposely do that to a child,
it's evil.
To bring, and we're not talking about children that already exist. We're talking about potential children that don't exist. So we don't need to talk about, well, it's better that they lived or didn't live. We're talking about a decision making before there's even been a creation of a child. I mean, would you want to bring a child into like a situation where they would not be able to eat or not be able to thrive? If you're so poor, would you advocate bringing those children into that situation? None of us would. We need to bring children in and love children and to the best situations that we can possibly bring them into, and care for them. They're people, and they have identities, and part of that identity is having that relationship with a mom and dad, and knowing where they're from, knowing who they are, even in the difficult situations. I mean, I often hear, and I'm sure you have, Kate, where the response often is, well, there's a whole lot of biological families that are really abusive. Well, yeah, but I mean, that's a fallacy. That's arguing from the extreme. Of course there are, but it's interesting that even in those situations, they still know their parent.
And they still want to know their parent.
They still want to have a relationship with that parent. It's astounding, especially anyone who's been in divorce situations. And that's one area where Kate and I connect also. We have both raised stepkids. That environment where there's like bad things going on in the bio realm, but these kids still need that connection. They still need to know them. And you can't just insert yourself as a third party into that and expect them to respond as if their biological connections don't matter. It hurts them in a very real way.
I hear oftentimes, well, you choose your family. Biological families aren't always wonderful either. And that's true. But I think what a lot of people miss when they say things like that is if you have a family that you have grown up with that was not, it was a toxic family, biological or not, just you have a toxic family, and you as an adult make the decision to limit or sever ties with that family, and you kind of create this love family of your own that's supportive. You have friends, maybe you have extended family that kind of becomes your close family. That is a conscious adult decision to do that. What is missing in this discussion is that when you're a baby, when you're a child, you have no say in anything. All these choices are being made for you, where you don't have a choice of your mother giving you up. Oftentimes the dads really even aren't contacted to be given an option in this either. And then you also don't have a say in which adopted family you're placed in. So I had the amazing experience of getting put with an amazing family. I know a lot of adopted children who didn't get such a fortunate luck of the draw, so to speak. So all this is being done to you, kind of like in any situation where these adults are making all these conception decisions and all this stuff, and they're purposefully doing things. The worst thing you can do is to deny access to a child's biological family by choice, by design. And I know that because the state of Ohio and the adoption agencies deny access to your origins, like you're perpetual children. Mm-hmm. And so in a sense, you are being blocked from knowing information. I mean, when I originally went searching for my biological mom, yes, I got the file, the non-identifying information file from the adoption agency. And I chose to circumvent the system because a lot of things at this point were not online as much as they are today. I found some wonderful people who felt the same way and who basically illegally went into various systems and obtained information for searching adoptees to help them out and to help them uncover more about their past. But I think another piece of evidence for how important your biology is to you is the onslaught of purchasing of 23andMe and Ancestry.com. I mean, you did that, even just to discover, the countries you came from.
We need to know our connections.
We need to know
and
our connections.
If we're so curious to know our connections from that distant, imagine how much we want it from our immediate.
Exactly.
If I really want to know, hey, I'm definitely Irish from my background. Well, if I need to know that and I really have a draw for that, don't you think I want to know who my mom and dad are?
Right.
And, and why I am the way I am and why I react the way I do. And not only that, and again, not just my self-knowledge, but you gain self-knowledge through your relationship and other knowledge. Mm-hmm. As I look at my mom, as I look at my dad, as I know my brother, I know myself. And you discover things about yourself in that relationship. And it's so key to understanding our identity. It's such common sense to me that I am often flabbergasted by the fact that people will say it doesn't matter. It's all about love. And love is important, definitely. And a biological family with no love is very damaging. But, a family that's not biological who has love, and you've done it purposefully. Again, I want to get that when you've designed this purposefully, knowing that you're going to cause pain to a child. Why are you doing that? What is your motivation? It's the adult desire to have something that they're not equipped to create, but they want it anyway. And they're going to do it anyway, no matter the cost. It's a very selfish action.
And it is. And one of the more interesting things when I'm in these different communities, I'm also in an ancestry group. And people who take the test, for example, just to, I want to see which ethnicity I am, fully thinking that they know who their biological family is. And then they get the test results back and it's like, wait a second. The person I thought was my father is not my father.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, these are like 30 and 40-year-olds who have decades, like, grew up with somebody who thought they were told was their dad. They all these things, they were loved, they were cared for, but then all of a sudden they're finding out, oh my gosh, this is not the person I thought that they were. And then they go on this quest to find out, well, gosh, who's my father? Well, and it turns out they were either a sperm donation or they were a product of an affair that was passed off as this person's child. Purposefully, by the mother in the affair case, or the mother and the father in the case of a sperm donation. And I have watched story after story, and the devastation to these people, the crumbling of identity. Who I thought I was is not who I am. And if that and if biology wasn't important, that wouldn't devastate them. If you grew up in a loving household, a mother and a father, or, you know, in some cases, a mother and a mother, or a father and a father, if love was all that mattered, then finding out something of that nature would not matter. But it does, and it's devastating, and it's hurtful because of the quest of needing to know our nature.
Well, in our relationship, and I think that's, it's definitely, that's the thing that bothers me here, is that it's not, we're treating, it's reductionistic materialism in a way. It's a reducing kids to just a product, and it doesn't matter how they're formed, but it only matters how they're nurtured and who's in their life from then on. Those can be really good relationships of their own. That child is more than just a material piece, you know.
A commodity.
That child is designed by two human beings, and they're a part of that. And they're made to be in relationship with their parents. It's just like our existence as human beings. We're made to be in relationship with our Creator. And I think this is one of the big problems that's underlying this whole dysfunction, is that we've rejected that relationship ultimately. And now we reject all kinds of relationships as designed. And we are made to be in relationship with the people who created us, because it's part of our identity. And to purposely remove that, you know, to think of a little girl growing up in a home where she is purposely removed from her mother, it is abhorrent to me. I mean, not that those people who are raising her can't love her in one way. I'm not saying that, or care for her, meet her needs, buy her clothing,
send her to
the best schools, which is usually interesting. Usually when they psychologists nowadays plot the or measure the viability of children in certain situations, they usually do it in these very material ways. You know, how are you performing in your school? How, you know, what kind of life are you living? You know, your health, physical health, and all that. They really don't talk relationally to these kids. It's like, you know, in the deep psychological aspects of them. But that's where our identity is. It's deep within. And, you know, these children are growing up not knowing those relationships and having been taken from them simply because you have a couple of people who want to play house, to be honest. You know, they want to create something that they don't have, even that they're not made and designed to do that. And, you know, if you're a single woman, you're not in a relationship designed to have a baby. I mean, you can have babies, you can do it, but you know, you're not in a relationship that brings together, because you can't do it alone, is what I'm saying. You have to bring in another person, and then you want to throw that other person aside in order to bring this child in. And you're doing it for a very, very selfish reason, and it will have ramifications on the children themselves.
Well, I think people...
That's been proven.
Especially with the whole all you need is love mentality. You know, we are forgetting biology. It does take an egg and a sperm uniting, all of the DNA that's encoded in both of those coming together to create a human. That's not love. Ideally, it is done in love, but the biology of that does not need love. It's simply a physical joining, but it's containing all the information that you need to form a person. And as we start understanding more and more about genetics and the field of epigenetics and ancestor memories and the studies they've done with Holocaust survivors' descendants and how trauma is even carried in DNA. It marks your DNA, and people generations later can still react to the trauma as though they were alive at that time. Those are very, very compelling reasons why we do need to be engaged with our biology. Because, and again, adoption serves a need in society. People that adopt pour out, in an ideal situation, so much love onto this child. Especially when you talk to adoptees where parents were not as forthcoming about information that they had access to, the pain that those people go through, especially from the people that vowed to take care of them and love them, to then not get the information that they need from those people specifically, causes a very, there is a grief that is experienced. And to people that...
It's a loss.
It is a loss. I mean,
it's a loss.
I can share that by the time I found out who my biological father was and was able to locate him, he had passed away. I will never get to experience and to meet my biological father. Whether or not he was a good person aside, there is that connection that I will never get. I have had to grieve a loss that's a very unique kind of loss. I've gotten to know him through other family members and things that people have shared with me, but I have never, me myself, gotten to experience any of that. And that's been hard, and nobody was preventing me from that, but yet I'm still grieving a man who is a part of me, but I never got to meet because of circumstances taking that away. But when you have somebody who has raised you and and says that they love you and want the best for you, then denying your access to a biological parent, that's painful. And that's another form of rejection, really, because it's
abandonment.
It is.
It's creating an abandonment situation from children from the get-go.
And it's also almost saying you don't need them. They're not important. But yet they are important to you. So if
you're lying to them.
So you're lying to them. And adoptees and anybody who's grown up without access to biological parent, when somebody rejects the DNA, the nature part of you, that's another...
It's a rejection of you.
It's a rejection of yourself. It's a rejection of you. And that's a hard, even going back to the step-parenting discussion, when you're dealing with, like a high conflict biological parent, and you think that they're doing a really awful job as a mother or father, as a step-parent, you don't ever say that to the child, because they are a product of their mother and father, and negatively talking about that person's person, that child is going to take that as a rejection and a criticism of themselves.
Mm-hmm. And I've experienced that. You've experienced that. I mean, it's something you struggle with in divorce situations. Not even the steps talking about the biological parents, but also one biological parent talking about the other biological parent, which is its whole another brew of dysfunction.
Yes.
And causes a lot of pain. And we have so many layers of problems when it comes to family. I mean, we could talk about divorce as being an issue. It's definitely, but at least in that situation, the kids know their parents. I mean, It's not an identity issue. Those are a broken relationship issue that can cause all kinds of its own kind of dysfunction. Adoption has its own difficulty. But this whole notion of, again, creating these kind of fabricated families with denying children a relationship, not just knowledge, information, like you've talked about the information and having it and how important that is, and it is, but there's also that other level of relationship. And that's why in divorce situations, you should work really hard to maintain the relationship with the biological parents, however it is, maintain that as best you can, unless you have outright abuse going on.
A child having access to both biological parents is
so key.
Paramount of importance.
And as a step parent, you can be a great support in that. You can be a great friend in a sense. You can be a parent in your own home in the sense of being the authority in your home over that child. But you will never replace that biological parent.
No.
You won't. I mean, they'll love you.
And you shouldn't try.
And you shouldn't try. I mean, like my children have a wonderful relationship with their stepdad. But he's not their dad. He never will be their dad. He'll be a great stepdad who they love and he loves them. But if he were to start to try to replace him actively and say that this other parent doesn't matter, that would cause a great rift in it also creates a very disturbing sense of loyalty within a child, because they know you're raising them, the step parent or even the parent who you're not the biological parent, but you brought this child into this world. Children are very loyal.
Oh, they are.
So say you have, a same-sex couple, two men, they bring this daughter into this world through surrogacy, and they've removed the mother from the relationship, and now they're saying, we're your parents. That creates that child is going to be loyal to those two men who are raising her. She's going to love him.
Until she's not.
But yet in that love, even in that is almost a kind of severe cruelty. It's a cruelty in that you set up this dysfunction of choice, within her, in that, but I still want my mom. And if you go to Anonymous Us, which is a website about kids like this, kids who are raised from sperm banks and, were brought into the world through that or surrogacy, and they talk about just that pain of, I know I'm supposed to love my, two dads. I'm supposed to, and I do. Now I feel so guilty because I long for my mom. Where's my mom? And I long for, and so you create this pain in this child. And my question is, why would you ever want to, on the front end, I'm not talking about already dealing with something that's already happened, because you're already dealing with a child who's existing. Of course, we all need to love that child. On the front end, why would you ever bring a child into that situation? Why would you ever do that to a child?
I think it's, I'm trying to get into a little bit of the psychology of these people. I think they are
singles as well as couples. Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of well-intentioned aspects of this, especially in adoption.
Well, yeah, but we're not talking about adoption. Yeah, because that is a totally different thing.
I think that that's
helping an already bad situation. I'm talking about clean slate. There's no babies. There's only potential babies.
There's no babies. I think that despite how we try to reframe the family and God's design, there's always a longing for children. Yes. For a legacy, for a sense of
immortality.
Yeah, I am leaving something in this world, and a lot of people choose to do that through children. They want to impart their genetics in some fashion or their love on another human being to then carry on a family name, a legacy, their personhood, whatever it is. There is that longing in most people.
Well, that's normal. I mean,
and that's normal. But then you start taking what's a normal feeling, and then it becoming something that they feel is a right. I have the right to a child. I have a right to this, and a child becomes more of an ownership, something that they deserve, rather than
because I have this desire.
Because I have this desire. Than something that's thoughtful and intentional of, can I be the best person? Is this the best situation? Can I truly, is this truly right?
Well, there's natural desires,
yes.
and then there's the execution of those desires,
Exactly.
and that can be the same way in a marriage. I mean, I was counseling a friend of mine who was in a really horrible marriage, really deprived and neglected sexually, and she's like, I have all these sexual desires, and I'm like, of course you do, and she goes, and I feel guilty about it, and I'm like, you shouldn't. Those are normal, natural desires, whether you're a man or a woman in marriage. If you're not getting fed sexually in a marriage, you have a right for that. I mean, a right, that's just a natural thing. I mean, that's part of marriage, is to be fed sexually, to have those desires. But if you say, well, I have these desires, therefore they deserve to be met. They're not being met by my husband, therefore I get to have an affair. I need to go out. Okay, well, your desires are right and good and normal and natural, but how you executed, how you acted out and to get those desires met was wrong and can't be justified. They can be understood in light of your natural desires, but how you went about it is all wrong. And like you said, the tragic thing about all these people who are saying, even like the mayor from Indiana, he and his husband want a child. Of course you do. The most foundational aspect of human society,
children,
are first the relationship with another person, and then children. That's the foundation of fighting back loneliness. Is having that one-on-one relationship in marriage, I think, and then having children. Of course you want that. And it's totally understandable, the heartache and the longing, like you said, the desire there is put in you. I'm sure a lot of single people, I know single people who long to be married, but they just aren't, and it's a grief within them. Or a couple, heterosexual couple who can't have kids.
Yes.
It's a grief. It is a grief because it is your natural desire to have that community, have that love, have that connection. But this is where maturity comes in. Discernment, wisdom, understanding what is right. Is that just because you long for something, desire something, does not mean you get to do whatever it takes, no matter who it hurts, to get what you want to fulfill that natural desire. That is just a fact of life. That is that way in all kinds of situations, and not just this situation. We have all kinds of natural desires in our lives, longings, needs as human beings that aren't met, either because of our nature, circumstances, our own personal choices, whatever, consequences. There's all kinds of things that make life unfair. You may just be like really unmarriable, unmarriable is the word, but yet you want to be, but you can't find the right spouse. That's tragic and sad. It's unfair, it's life, but it's just life. You may be a homosexual in a homosexual relationship. That's your choice, nature, however you want to see it. But the fact of the matter is you can't reproduce. That's just a fact. You have all the desires for that community, of that family, but you can't create it. Not without hurting someone. If you're a single woman and you really want that baby, but you just don't want a man in your life. Oh, I love when I hear actresses say that. Katy Perry was one of them. Where I don't want to be embroiled in a relationship with a man, but I want my baby. I want a baby. Well, your natural desire as a woman, yes, of course you do. You could love a child. You have that God-given makeup to create and to love.
Maternal instinct.
Paternal, whatever it is, you have that. That is in you. And it's a beautiful thing. And I think that's what we're drawn to, and that's where the empathy comes in all of these situations. I think that's why people get mad, like at people like me who are like saying, you shouldn't behave this, you shouldn't do this. They're like, but, and I understand the empathy they're feeling. Understand the desire. But we have that in a lot of different ways and a lot of different circumstances. People want certain jobs. They want to do and create certain things. I want to be an amazing artist to express all this that's within me. But we all don't always have the ability, the circumstances, the choices that we've made to do that.
Right.
And to fabricate it, to make it happen in a way to force it, especially when you are going to cause other people pain, even if you can say that you're balancing it out with some good, Hey, I'm going to provide for them really well. I'm going to love them really well. Yeah, well, that may be. But you're also hurting them terribly. Reflect a little bit and get out of yourself and get out of your own I want and I desire, as natural and normal and healthy in that itself is, and think of other people. Think about what the right thing to do is, not just what you desire, as natural as it is, and that's always, it's hard to do.
I think some of the people that I found throughout my life that I respected the most is when I meet a husband and a wife who are married, and they even can have kids, but they've reflected between the two of them. They reflected on themselves, and they've decided that despite societal pressure that married people must have children, they don't want children. They do not want to bring a child into this world. They don't want to give up their careers. They don't want to give their time up as a married couple, their travel, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And that might, and they get lambasted for being super selfish. But to me, that when I hear something like that, I'm like, congratulations for being mature.
Or at least self-aware.
And self-aware that this is not what you really want. Mm-hmm. Or because of your careers, maybe even if you want a child, you're both doctors and you have insane schedules, or
you couldn't take care of a child.
You couldn't take care of a child, or that they would be being raised by a nanny, or that they would be being raised in a boarding school or whatever. They've reflected and they've decided, our life situation is just not as such to carefully bring a child into this world. Given our situation, I have a lot of respect for that.
Oh, I had a friend in the past who had a lot of mental illness in her family, a lot, and she even struggled. A bit of a narcissist herself, a little bit, and that kind of just maybe bipolar. I can't remember, but she had her tubes tied because she's like, I'm not going to bring a child into this world. I would like to have a child, but I can't risk. And that may have been fear on her part. Some people could have counseled, trust God and all that, and how that goes. But she was like, no, I don't think I could love a child or give a child what she or he needs. So I'm not going to do it. She was reflective about her own situation to know that that wasn't something that she could do given her situation. And the same could be said, like you're saying, about choices. If I'm making a choice about my career, I'm not going to bring a child into this. If you've made a choice, or you're living a certain lifestyle, or you're being in a certain way that's not conducive for a child, make the mature decision and don't do it.
Unless you want to change something down the road.
Or change yourself. Or change yourself. Change your situation. Make the situation that you're in right for the child that you so want. So if you're a single woman and you really, really want that child, go through the hard work of developing a relationship with a man who's going to be the father of that child so that you can raise them together. It's hard work being married, and doing that. If that's what you want, if you really want that, but just to say, I'm going to skip that and I'm going to go down to the sperm bank, go through the takeout window and order my sperm and have my baby and deprive this child of half of her identity. I mean, what are you doing it for? I mean, look yourself in the mirror. You're not doing that for the child. You're doing that solely for yourself. You're doing that solely because you don't want to be lonely. You're doing it solely because you do want that family. Again, lots of people don't. Lots of people do want that, but don't pretend that you're doing it for a selfless reason.
Mm-hmm. And, just kind of wrapping up a couple of my thoughts, in line with a little bit more of adoption in my experience. For people who are choosing to adopt, which is an amazing calling, and I think the laws right now are getting so much better with
open adoption.
Open adoption, even to the point of allowing the adopting parents in the birth room with the biological mother, and there's more of a relational connection between nature and nurture. I think that's wonderful, and that's more along the lines of what's intended and what's healthy for the child, even if that requires some privacy sacrifice on the biological mother's side and some sacrifice on the adopting parent side too.
Not to be able to control everything.
Not to be able to control everything. That's really just a lovely experience. I've known several people who have been open adoption experiences, and that's really been a much, for the child, healthier situation where they have access to whatever they want. And a lot of times, these natural mothers go on to have more children in other relationships. My biological mother got married 5 years after I was born and went on to have more children.
So you have half brothers and sisters.
I have half brothers and sisters on both sides, and finding that out was really joyful for me, and that's really healthy. So if there's anything that I can say, kind of just on a adoptive health standpoint, if you are looking to adopt in this day and age, try to make it so that they have access to information, that you work with people who encourage a respect for both the nature and nurture moving forward. And that's really such a profound, wonderful thing for a child, to have the freedom to explore and to figure out who they are on their terms. Is just, that's the best.
I saw a real good example of that, and then I'll wrap up too. My best friend from college couldn't have children. She and her husband couldn't have a child, and they adopted about 13 years ago, I guess. And it was an open adoption. Mm-hmm. So, but my friend ended up, and they maintained this relationship. Birthdays were celebrated together. Her daughter knew her birth mom, and my friend ended up getting breast cancer, and she died. And the thing that was really a blessing in that was that her daughter was able to have a mom still. Not her. Mm-hmm. She lost, my friend had lost her adopted mom, but she wasn't alone in all that. She had her dad, but then she also still had her biological mom to reach to in the midst of that. And it was really, it's a hard thing. I talked to my friend about that, the open adoption, and it is hard because you're sharing your motherhood or fatherhood, and fatherhood with someone else. It's difficult. It's almost like a divorce situation a little bit.
It is.
Yeah. And it's odd and difficult. We like things to be really reductionistic and simple. I think that's kind of the attitude about these kind of situations is, it's just easy, just cut out the bios, and just have these, simple reconstructed family, and we can move along and pretend like this is all there is. But that's selfish, short-sighted, and it doesn't take into consideration the complexity of human beings and their need for the relationship for the ones who created them. Yeah. So anyway, I think I'm going to end. Thank you, Kate. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and thank you for listening. I know this is a complex issue, and if you try to simplify it, you're just going to start getting really angry at everyone. So it's probably best to really think about the different dynamics to it. So thank you, and I'll be back next time.